Let's talk about MSNBC. Let's keep it going with the fake news. We got this from Newsbusters, another story. Insane. MSNBC host thinks DeSantis wants to codify white supremacy by banning critical race theory. MSNBC is known for its insane and vile commentary, which occurs on an almost daily basis. But this one might be the craziest comments this week. During a segment on MSNBC's The Beat with Ari Melber, fill-in host Jason Johnson discussed Governor Ron DeSantis, his support of a bill that would ban critical race theory in public schools. Johnson claimed the proposed legislation, titled Stop Woke Act, is DeSantis's new effort to codify white supremacy for political gain. What does white supremacy mean? See, this was one of the big issues that occurred. One of the points of contention for the episode we did with R.A., the Rugged Man, was that I don't think even he knows his own definition of white supremacy.
Right.
And a lot of people don't. Typically, the cultural right believes white supremacy to mean someone who believes they are genetically superior based on their race or the ideology of that. But the leftists, critical race theorists, believe white supremacy literally just means dominant culture. So when the left says white supremacy, they're referring to the fact that most people in this country are white. That's it. So they'll say things like, when they say, Hollywood is a white supremacist institution, what people on the right hear is that they're accusing people in Hollywood of believing they're genetically superior based on race. What the left is saying is that it's an institution created by white people that mostly benefits the majority, the largest, race, like majority race in the country. Because of this, you end up with stories like this. They make no sense. So so I would argue this. If you take away the word white supremacy and replace it for what they're actually saying and say that Jason Johnson said the Stop Woke Act is DeSantis' new effort to codify traditional American culture for political gain, it's like, oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I don't know. It doesn't sound nearly as insane.
Well, I think definitions matter here, and that's why in yesterday's interview I was like, wait, what do you mean by this? What is your understanding of this? Because I think there was a disconnect with what we thought the words mean. And when it comes to the word white supremacy, it has been used and abused to such a silly level that I feel like in some instances it's losing its meaning, it's losing its power, because it rained and MSNBC was freaking out saying it's white supremacy that caused it to rain. I'm being facetious here, but they literally almost blame everything underneath the sun. If you're going on nature hikes, that's white supremacy. Going out in nature is white supremacy. And I'm like, you're devaluing this word and this meaning. So for MSNBC to say this as hyperbolic as they are, it's like, okay, what are you really trying to say here? Because you bastardized the language.
They're
so
zombies.
Much.
They're zombies. Zombies and zombie lords. That was, I loved that conversation we had when Ian was here. I was like, because NPCs, zombies, kind of interchangeable. And then I mentioned, well, some of these people know they're lying. But I think the people at MSNBC who are saying this stuff are just mindlessly repeating the words. But there are people who know they're changing the definition of the words to manipulate people into joining their cult ideology. And so I asked, are zombies evil? And I think Ian first said no. He's like, no. They're neutral or whatever. And then we looked up, or actually, no, I think he said zombies are evil. In the official Dungeons & Dragons, zombies are evil. So even if you're mindless, like this is the perfect example of the banality of evil. Mindlessly going along with evil. I'm sorry, that makes you evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Luke, you're totally right. The definition changing, and then they repeat the words that are not. They don't mean anything anymore. I'm calling this the death of language. That's how you create multiple realities, because there's a whole group of people operating in certain definitions, and there's another group of people operating in different definitions. Like when the guy drove the car through the people at the Christmas parade, we saw a lot of tweets and headlines that was a car that drove through people.
The SUV.
That's you're killing language there, right? It was an accident.
accident.
But if it was someone else who looked differently, they would sensationalize that to make it very specific, to make it, you afraid of that.
It's almost as if it's Orwellian. It's almost as we're going through double speak, which I've
heard of that.
Yeah. And I think we could relate to that, since, of course, even scientific definitions of herd immunity, vaccines are being changed right in front of our eyes when it meant something else previously before. And I think the same thing is happening with white supremacy.
Exactly. The word racist changed. That went from being just prejudice against somebody because of their race to being about powers and systems and oppression and prejudice, and white people or black people can't be racist and white people are they can only just have prejudice against
Larry
them,
Elder,
racism
the
against
black
them.
face of white supremacy.
Yeah, I mean, it has no meaning. It's watered down, but it's like crazy that these audiences either love that they're changing the definition or don't realize it. But either way, it's the same end result, and it's evil.
There's a couple of the issues, you know. And I gotta say, like, we all really want to talk about what happened last night, but it really was a good example of the culture war, and what happens afterwards. So one of the things that happened afterwards is Vosh. We've had him on the show a couple times. Right. He's made progress. I have great respect. When he first came on the show, he called me far right. Yesterday, or maybe this earlier today, he called me a conservative. So he's moving me closer to the middle.
That's almost a liberal.
Almost, I'm getting close to being a centrist. But he actually defended me. He made a really good point. He said something like, let's be real, guys. If this was any other mixed race person explaining they experience racism and a white person was laughing in their face and insulting them, you would be on that person's side. But because it's Tim Pool, you want to be mad at him. And I was like, wow. And then Vosh went on to say Tim Pool is a conservative, and then of course that means he's racist. And I was like, oh, come on,
so close.
You're so close. And then I go, and then he presses play, and I go, I want to abolish the police. And he goes, thank you, Tim. And I'm like, bro, the problem is everybody shared one small clip, so the narrative becomes something untethered to reality. If any one of these people would just actually take their heads out of the sand and consume media to better understand it, then a lot of this might stop happening. But the other issue is when it came to the actual conversation with RA, many of these people don't agree that he is being racist because in their new moral framework or lack thereof, white people are allowed to insult people who are not white, and that's not racism so long as their ideology is in line with the tribe or the cult. So when they say racist, what they're really saying is deviant. They're saying you're a deviant. So when I call him a deviant, people go, no, he's not. He's perfectly in line with wokeness. So to them, they're hearing me like they don't hear the word racist the way we do. When I say to him, you're a racist, I'm saying you literally said that you would judge someone based on the content. You would judge someone on the color of their skin. To me, you're being racist when you discriminate against someone on their race. To them, racist just means you are a deviant from our ideology.
If you were a media darling and and RA was in here with a MAGA hat, and he accused you, even laughed at you, they would have said Tim Pool, Asian podcaster, to make sure we all knew he's a victim.
Let me explain something that, one of the jokes that we make on the show every so often is that blonde hair, blue-eyed Luke Rudkowski is a person of color and literal second generation mixed race Tim Pool is white. I'm like, I don't even know what is going on in their brains. But I think it's fair to say what they're really saying is deviant when they say racist or white supremacist.
You brought up this point. Would you happen to have the old definition and the new definition by any chance? Because I think I saw something online. I don't know where to look
for
racism? Of the term racism.
Not the exact definition, but off the top of my head, I believe it was something more along the lines of what we generally believe, that it's just hate or prejudice because of somebody's race or skin color. Now, I think at least one dictionary, and just in many schools of thought, like in academia, you'll see the definition be changed to it's prejudice and prejudice plus power. So black people can't be racist because they could be prejudiced, but they don't have power in today's white supremacist racist system. So black people therefore can't be racist, and white people can't be victims of racism because they have the power and the prejudice. So they're just nothing just comes at them.
And then Luke isn't white because Slavic people experienced oppression, and Asian people in America are white because they have high incomes on average. So they've turned white into an ideology.
It's a boogeyman.
Well, if you look at history is filled with oppression, whether you're Chinese or Japanese or Korean or Polish. You look, people have been screwed over throughout historically, but, do you see people leveraging that for their own kind of purposes or excuses? To me, it's like thinking low of somebody, and it's thinking low of yourself. And I think some of it is done deliberately. This is just my perspective. I might be wrong. Someone might be able to convince me that I'm wrong. But for me, I think something that really does oppress people is saying continually, you're oppressed, you're oppressed, you're oppressed. And when you keep putting that into someone's mind, they create an identity that is oppressed, that does believe that they have lack of opportunities, and that kind of mindset, that kind of idea, that kind of larger consciousness that you're putting out there to your regular life, that you're manifesting, that you're creating, is creating that of lack, of being the victim.
I want to chase this deviant idea too, because there was something else that came up yesterday in the show that exemplifies this. When I was trying to explain that this world is comprised of many people with different worldviews, RA's response was, I said, your worldview. He said, yeah, reality. And so here's what I think happens. He believes he's in the moral majority. He believes that his ideas are represented by most people, or that, he's on the side of good or whatever. But a lot of these people don't seem to realize that when you have, 80 million people voting one way and 80 million people voting the other, certainly there are two distinct, perceptions, or I should say overarching perceptions. So for me, when I started getting into this work, and I mean, just doing journalism in general, I remember I went during Occupy Wall Street. There was a pro-life rally at the Federal Building by Wall Street, by the stock exchange. And we went and we saw all these people and we saw them waving their flags, and I listened to what they said. And my attitude's always been like, if we're talking about helping the working class, that means recognizing that half the working class are conservative and half are, left or whatever. And that means we really need to understand where people are in general, not just one side of things. But too many of these people think 99% of the country is them, and there's this weird deviant group of people. So when they say you're a racist, they're saying you are not in line with the moral majority, which is us. Our ideology is correct. And then when I try and point something out, like there are 80 million people who roll the other direction from you and don't agree with you, they say that's not true. They don't believe it. They reject that, or they say, well, those people are wrong and crazy, or grifters, or liars. And it's like, that's why you'll often hear people say that the right thinks the left is misguided, but the left thinks the right is evil. I think that's starting to change now with many on the right, and the funny thing too is the right is not just right wing, it's also comprised of the center. Like if you actually look at Pew's research on this, which is hilarious, the stressed sideline, they call it, apolitical individuals lean right. And it's because the left has gone off the rails. When you look at that Axios poll we looked at last week, that shows young Democrats are overwhelmingly antagonistic based on politics and not conservatives, we can see whatever is happening, it's happening as an effect of modern left culture or whatever.
And I think it's working brilliantly to the benefit of the special interests that really kind of pull the strings, that really kind of set the news stories, that set the agenda, that set the narrative. Because let's call a spade here. There's a lot of things you and RA agreed on. There's so many things that the government does that you weren't happy about. I know, but hold on. Let me just get to this point. There's so many things you guys had in common, especially with your visions and your ideas and your beliefs and things that you went through that was outside of the established narrative. But on this point, it brought you two guys towards a very tense, angry moment between each other. That's how powerful and divisive a lot of this stuff is, where even if you could see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, you still fight each other. That's crazy amount of power and division.
I got to stop you there, bro. When RA says to me, you think you've got it worse than black people in this country? And I said, no, I agree with you. I actually did work on the subject. And then he says it again 3 times. I'm like, bro, I don't know how many times I need to tell you. I agree with you on that. But for him to just be like, no one is allowed to talk about racism because of the black struggle, I'm like, this dude you cannot reason with. I literally tell him, you are correct. I agree with you. Critical race theory should not be banned in schools. It's just the praxis of. And he goes, okay, all right. How many times does he need to say something? He goes, y'all called Kyle Rittenhouse a hero. And I said, we never did that. And he went, okay. I'm like, how many times do I need to reach out and say, I agree with you, I agree with you, I agree with you? But he didn't, it's like, it's not, it's that's why I'm saying it's about being a deviant. It's about not being in line with our orthodoxy. So that's what they're calling you.
Yes. By and large, what I was saying, you said it more eloquently and a lot better than I did. Because, again, there was terms of agreement, but it still led to confrontation, which to me is mind-boggling of how they are able to control the narrative in a way where it still leads to no understanding and a fighting. And that, to me, deserves to be pointed out.
But listen, I think we all understood him. I think we were all analytical as to think, like we analyzed the things he had been saying. He talks about news in a way where he didn't understand things. he was talking about how we didn't know what critical race theory was, and I gave him just a very generalized, here's one of the authors, here's what they've stated, here's what they've believed, because I read this stuff. And full disclosure, when we had Vosh on the first time, I was miserable in trying to break down what critical race theory was, and I think Vosh made a great point when he was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, my view of it is the cultural like wokeness and stuff, but you know what? I absolutely owned up to that and said, it's a good point. I should not use a phrase that I have not read the literature on. So I pulled up the book from Kimberly Crenshaw and I started reading. Did not read the whole thing. I read the first few bits of it to understand the origins of it. I read quotes and comments from Derek Bell. I read some D'Angelo and some Ibram X. Kendi. And I'm still not going to pretend to be an expert. But for someone to come in here, say these things, and for me to be like, which of these authors do you agree with? And him to be like, I don't know that. I have no idea. I don't know anything about it. I'm like, okay, here's a problem. If I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of the stuff we agree on, but no matter how much we try to come to your side and say, we want to rectify this, you still just say, you guys are racists, you guys are white supremacists, you are bootlickers. There is no coming together. There's no compromise. There's no resolving this bridge. I'll just stress this point again. When I'm literally like, you are right and I agree with you. And the response from the other side is, I don't care. Screw you. You're a lying piece of crap. I'm just like, all right, that's it. It's conflict.
The divide is real, and it's very strong.
I'm trying to stay positive.
Yeah.
But
I was going to ask, is there anything that could bridge this divide? Is there anything possible?
I think so. I met a lady yesterday, total stranger, in her 70s. A nice lady. We agreed on books and music. And we were there looking at some stuff, and there was another gentleman there who I don't really know, but she knew, and she pulled me to the side and said, he's an anti-vaxxer. And I was like, everyone can do whatever they want. I'm okay. And I didn't mind. And she kept trying to get politics out of me. And she was trying to like find labels and how to like pigeonhole me next, right? Yeah. And then 30 minutes later, she says, I wish every Republican would drop dead. Just like that. And she was totally fine. It was normal. Like she could say it to a stranger. Yep. And I'm like, well, that's a horrible thing to say. And I was like, I think you are putting labels on too many people, and you're hearing certain words like that, he didn't want the vaccines. Now he's all these things. Maybe he's racist in your mind, a MAGA supporter, whatever. And I'm like, if you just take the labels away and you talk to people about the real problems, you'll probably agree on lots of things like what Tim and RA were talking about. And then she was like, I did have an hour-long conversation with this man. He was very nice. But once he said the vaccine thing, all the alarms went off in her head that she would hear the buzzwords on CNN. And I think if you start to strip away labels, like that's why that when I see words like woke, I hate words like that. I'm so sick of words like that because it automatically makes anyone who agrees with woke stuff and who doesn't agree with it want to fight about it.
Yeah.
Just strip away those stupid words. I think we use too many bad words like cancel culture and woke.
There's a compulsive need to label people, though. People try to do the same thing to me all the time, and even when they find out what I believe in, there's still no label to put on it, so then they get even more frustrated. But I need to know, I think it's getting worse, actually, the compulsive need to label people, but I need to know, like, how do we combat that? Like, how do we change the messaging to the point where people don't feel the need to be like, hey, like, what do you believe about that? And then immediately assume your political party or assume everything else you believe.
It's like gang members. It's like, are you a blood? Yeah. Are you a Crip?
No,
it is.
It's for real.
Dude, I really, Luke and I, we went to the Peace Wall in Northern Ireland, and I really recommend people go to Belfast and look at the Peace Wall. It will be a shock to your system. I mentioned this a lot when we were there, and there's like, on one side it's pro-Israel, and the other side it's pro-Palestine, and I was confused, and I asked this guy who was there, I was like, I don't understand, like, what does the Irish conflict have to do with Israel and Palestine? And the dude said, whatever idea one side adopts, the other side takes the opposite stance. Yeah, it's just tribalism. And I was like, wow.
And it's neighbors living next to each other with huge walls dividing them. Literally, neighbors rioting and fighting each other to the point where they're killing each other. And they're neighbors. They live in the same kind of country. They kind of have the same identity. They have a different kind of religious point of view. But that divide is so strong and crazy, where they literally burn effigies of other people's belief systems and representatives in celebration in defiance of the other side. So that was a surreal experience to see that larger kind of, some people call it a festival, that literally leads to marches and fights and riots in Northern Ireland, which was absolutely crazy to see and experience myself.
That's just one small area relative to the rest of the world. And this kind of thing is gripping the entire U.S. Like you saying the lady said she wished Republicans would all just drop dead. Mm-hmm. Like, look, I think there's a lot of really great things to focus on in terms of, freedom. Gun rights are being strengthened, but there's also, I'm not trying to be a downer. I do think that freedom and individualism is actually gaining a lot of ground in a lot of different ways. But I also think the hyperpolarization is becoming more and more enraged. Like the story you explained it. Mm-hmm. People are just getting angry. Like, I don't care. Yeah. I just hate. Yeah. And that's scary.
She's a victim of the corporate press. They fed her fear.
But it's more than that too. I mean, so one of the things that R.I. said at the beginning of the show is that he said something to the effect of everything is all these media outlets are extremely divisive, and we're doing the exact same thing here on this show. And I said, you're right. I agree. We talk about that. When we see MSNBC say that, Ron DeSantis is codifying white supremacy or whatever garbage, and then we criticize them, and Newsbuster says they're known for insane, vile commentary and all that stuff. Yeah, we're sitting here with a bunch of people listening, and they're going to be like, I don't like MSNBC and what they do. And then we're going to get people who are only going to take small clips of this show and then do the counter of saying, look at what they're saying, they're vile, racist or whatever. And all it does is create echo chambers where everyone hates each other more and more and more. I suppose the one difference is one side is objectively correct. And that side is whatever this side is. And it's not the right. It's not libertarian. It's just literally there are people who are right and people who are wrong. And if you look at the Jussie Smollett story, the Covington kids, Nick Sandmann stuff, you look at Kyle Rittenhouse, you look at Russiagate. Did I say Russiagate? You look at Ukrainegate, 2 impeachments. Wow, one side is objectively wrong all the time. What do I get criticism for? Bad predictions. Bad predictions are different from factual errors. If I see the stock market doing really, really well and then say, I think Donald Trump's gonna nail this election, and then a COVID happens and he doesn't, that's just me not realizing a pandemic was gonna happen. But when you say Donald Trump colluded with Russia and he literally did not, or you claim these kids were getting in the face of a Native American and they literally did not, you live in a twisted, malformed, decayed reality. And then if you become hateful and vile and angry or violent because of it, yeah, one side is dangerous. And when you have a horde of angry zombies, how do you deal with it?
That's a good question.
I'm running to the woods. I'm going deep in the woods.
Yeah. That's literally what I did. I left New York City, went to the middle of the woods of New Hampshire, joined the Free State Project. But is there anything that could help? And again, I made this argument. I don't think we should call them zombies. Because there are people who could go back from that state of watching the corporate media to waking up. Zombies you can't bring back to life. When it comes to corporate media heads who watch the fear-based mind control, people could come back from that. People could come to an understanding and say, hey, I could see that. So I don't think we should call them zombies because I think that kind of furthers the divide. But let's just call them zombies for now. Is there anything bringing them back to life? And is there anything that could heal the divide? Do you guys... What is it? But
I think when I say zombie, I'm referring to the people who are totally zombified.
I think there's some people that you just can't bring back no matter how you try to reason with them, no matter what type of facts you put in front of them, as was demonstrated. I mean, you can agree with everything that they're saying basically, and they're still going to call you a white supremacist, racist based off of these new made up definitions and terms. And they could literally be a white person sitting here yelling at you that I've had white people call me I'm anti-black and that I'm racist and that I hate myself and I have internalized racism and misogyny and all this types of stuff. And I can sit here and look at them and laugh at them and be like, and just ask them to explain themselves, and they can't. It's just because, like Tim said, it's just I like the word deviant. It's just because I'm deviant.
Yeah, but there is a political transformation. There is a political change, and it happens in some people. Even Tucker Carlson. But it
goes both ways.
Pro-establishment, of course. Pro-establishment, pro-war. CNN, MSNBC, toting the line, repeating the speeches. Now he criticizes the Republicans, criticizes the Democrats, criticizes the intelligence agencies, and does something
agrees with Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah. Has Glenn Greenwald on his show, and
that's big for Glenn Greenwald too.
And Tulsi Gabbard on his show all the time, right. And rages against the kind of intelligence state.
It's a new political faction.
So like some people would consider him a zombie that has a zombie lord to someone who is come back to life and is now helping people awaken from this zombiness.
There's an article that Daily Dot wrote about what happened here. And it was just like, it's crazy how they just don't watch the show. They don't care to get the facts straight. But one of the things they point out was that in the clip, I highlighted a documentary I did on Ferguson and what the black community was going through with going on tour and racism. And they said, but Tim Pool failed to mention that he made that before his politics did a 180. What? So let's assess that real quick. If I literally pull up a documentary I made 7 years ago and say, I completely agree with this message for the documentary that I put together 7 years ago, how have my politics changed if I'm literally like, this exemplifies my view on systemic racism? Quite literally, it's the same political opinion as when the documentary was made. And I'll tell you this too. They wanted me to say a line in that documentary I did not say. They wanted me, the final line of the documentary was that the police of St. Louis were created by and the descendants of slave catcher patrols. Wow. And I was like, that's a little too much, guys. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily untrue in some contexts, but it's mostly not true. There are some police departments where they started as, slave catching. And then most police departments, and I looked all this up, they were just ideas and institutions that were adopted from, I think, France and other European countries that we decided to implement here as we expanded sheriff's department and law enforcement. So I'm like, that goes too far. That's what they wanted in it. Mm. So my politics haven't changed on this. But it's really interesting because what that means is this group of people they moved around me. So here I am in this position on the left, and the establishment media moves to the left where I stay in the same position. And now they're like, look, he spun a 180. And I'm like, yo, it's you guys who wrapped all the way around the other direction. Mm-hmm. How is it that I'm going to defend this and you're going to claim I disagree with it?
They move so far left that you look far right.
Mm-hmm. And I haven't moved anywhere. Right. I'm always just like, hey, it's wrong to be racist.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I got to say, this is why I'm really pessimistic. And at the end of the member segment, I said, I think racism will never go away.
Right.
And it was because of people like R.A. It was because he is a white guy who claims white people are privileged, who thinks he's justified as a white man to tell minorities what to do and laugh at them when people talk about their problems or experiences of racism. He laughs in their face. Yeah. And I was like, why would that go away? So this is a guy who, in every respect, 100 years ago probably would have been a white supremacist. 100 years ago, this country was overwhelmingly white supremacist. And now, today, many people have adopted the more civil rights view and have become more accepting and more understanding. And he's still of the mindset. And it's not just him. I don't mean to single him out. It's the woke that they, as the white savior, the privileged race, has the right to determine what minorities should be doing. And I'm like, what changed? What about white supremacy has changed and these people are still doing it?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to be considerate of your virtues. And not just change on every issue based on your gang affiliation or the level of political power you're going to gain for standing on this side or acceptance from larger society. I mean, I always, throughout my journalism career, always said, okay, what are my virtues? What do I represent? What ideas am I going to go out there to the general public? And to me, it was always anti-war, freedom, privacy, the rights of individuals over the collective. And I always stood on those virtues, but I've been called a right-wing racist teabagger by Chris Matthews of MSNBC. Sean Hannity, I'm not sorry, not Sean Hannity. Bill O'Reilly said We Are Change is a jihad-loving leftist liberal organization, and I got slandered for it, but my position has never changed. Yeah. When Obama was in power, I was called a conservative. When Bush was in power, I was called a liberal. And again, I don't believe in any of that gang affiliation. Your virtues should matter more.
Luke has one political position.
Freedom.
The government sucks.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm with you.
I'm with you. I'm all for that.
I'm with you.
Abolish taxes, all of them, immediately.
Oh, yeah. It. I'm in New York where we have new mandates now for the mask, and
crazy.
It's just like if you have kids and you love your kids, you hate your government if they try to get between you and your kids.
Exactly.
And they're trying to wear. I mean, they had like 5-year-olds running around outside this summer, 90-degree weather, with the masks on. I'm like, you guys are waterboarding these kids, basically.
So what is the option for New Yorkers? Like, what do you... Leave?
Oh, I think most of them like it.
You can't fight?
I think most of them in the city area like it.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.